Civic League. I'm Scott Wilson. I'm a member of the Civic League's Executive Committee, and I serve as president of the Noshop Homeowners Association, which is one of the Civic League's 25 local neighborhood associations on island. Today's annual forum is a traditional event. It furthers one of the Civic League's core missions, encouraging participation in town government. Our aim is to help Nantucket voters make informed choices when they go to the polls on May 23rd. We encourage voters to turn out, and we provide the candidates with this opportunity to address the broad audience of island voters. Today's program, Today's program is designed to inform our Zoom participants and today's audience watching the forum live on NCTV 18. A recording of this forum will be available for others to view later as an on-demand YouTube video. The Nantucket Civic League is a 501c3 nonprofit corporation and is nonpartisan. We sponsor this event without favor or prejudice toward any candidate, and we invite all candidates in contested races to attend and participate. Our thanks go out to all the candidates for committing their time and energy to seeking public office. I have volunteered to act as the moderator today. Mary Warrow has volunteered to serve as timekeeper to keep us on schedule. She will signal each candidate when their allotted time is up. Before we begin, we have a special request for our participating Zoom attendees. We encourage you to submit your typed in questions anytime you want, including right now. Your questions will appear on my screen in the order of submission. I plan to read each one aloud in that order. So please start submitting them as soon as you want. To submit a question electronically, click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen and type your question. It can be directed to one specific candidate, or it can be directed to all of the candidates. Now on to the select board contest. You'll hear from the 4 candidates who are running for the 2 open seats: Tom Dixon, Malcolm McNabb, Kathleen Richin, and Clifford Williams. We've allocated 2 minutes to each candidate for an opening statement about one's qualifications for office and position on issues. After that, I will have 1 or 2 questions for candidates, and then we will move on to the Zoom audience questions in the order they have been submitted. At about 3:20, we'll allow each candidate 2 minutes for a closing statement. And now, without further ado, let's get started. Up first with an opening statement is Tom Dixon. Mr. Dixon, over to you.
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate the opportunity to meet with you all today to talk about all of our candidacies for the Nantucket Select Board. I am Tom Dixon. I'm a candidate for Select Board, as I just said. And I've been on Nantucket for quite a while. My first job here was working at Stephen Swift downtown about 20 years ago, up there on Main Street, nice high perch over Main. And then since then, I've worked, my previous position before my current position was legislative liaison for State Representative Dylan Fernandez. We worked on home rule petitions, budget amendments, legislation, all the district priorities. We passed 10 home rule petitions while we were there, some including changing the Board of Selectmen to Select Board. We also secured money for shellfish propagation for mental health, and part of the liaison's job was constituent cases, help with state agencies, unemployment cases, which there were hundreds during the pandemic, and some of which were very complicated because of the seasonal employment nature of Nantucket. Some of my other experience, I am currently the Assistant Executive Director of Nantucket Food, Fuel, and Rental Assistance. I'm in charge of oversight of the food pantry. I volunteered there for many years, and then got my current position. I serve as the affordable housing advocate on the short-term rental work group right now. It was nominated by the Housing Stakeholders Group. Nonprofit service, I was a director, officer, and family support chair for Habitat for Humanity for 6 years. And I am currently the vice president of the Nantucket Racket Sports Association, which where you'll find me most winter days. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Next up, Malcolm McNabb.
Well, first I want to thank the Civic League for this opportunity to talk to the community. And of course, to many of my island friends who supported me in what I must say has been a very unique and challenging experience for me personally. Preparing my opening statement, I went back to what I said last year. I talked about how we were stewards of a treasure. I mentioned the obvious problems with our environment, housing. The government doesn't always seem to be transparent. I don't need to tell you this. You know all this. I could go on and on and on. The words sometimes are just fluff. So I'm just telling you, let's all get together. Let's get on with what needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Kathleen Richin.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Kathy Richin, and I'm running on my experience directly with the town of Nantucket. I started working for the finance department in 1991. I retired in 2016. For the past 5 years, I've been working part-time at the CPC, Community Preservation Committee. So back when I was in the finance department, I was the operations coordinator. In that position, I oversaw the general ledger. I knew what was happening with the money in all the various funds that we have. Another part of my job was risk management. And in that piece, I had all of the insurance policies for the town and all of the claims, big claims and little claims, but all the claims came over my desk. So it was a hands-on kind of learning experience because I had to perfect my skills in negotiation and conflict resolution in dealing with the claimants, the insurance company, and the needs of the town. So many years I did that. And I feel as though my knowledge of the town and the way it operates and my skills in negotiation are skills that would be very useful on the select board. I think that's my opening statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Clifford Williams. You're on mute.
There you go. Always muted. I thought you guys were in control of the mute. Anyhow, thank you, Scott, Peter, and Civic League for putting this event on. Probably everybody knows me. I've run for over 10 years continuously, and one of the great things about it is I looked up the problems we had 10 years ago, and they're the same problems we have now. So we haven't missed anything. So it's a great opportunity to again just try to move forward. I think we should get back to the basics on the island. I think we sometimes try to do too many things. I look at the roads, I look at the landfill, I look at the problems we have with the school now, even though the school committee basically is in charge of most of that, but I think we need to up our game. There's some serious problems up there. We have a situation with these windmill fields off of Nantucket that a lot of people don't know about and the devastation it's going to cause for the island. The African Meeting House situation that's never been resolved. There's other situations I've dealt, actually, we talk about Dylan Fernandez, the child and family court system here on the island and probably everywhere in the country is pretty devastating. I think we need to look at some core problems we have in society and with the town and just stick with the basics. And that's why I just continue to run and I look for your support. Thanks.
Thank you. So we'll move on to the first question, which is from me. What do you see as the most significant challenge facing Nantucket, and how would you propose to address that challenge? And we'll start with Malcolm.
There are a lot of significant challenges. Certainly the big challenge now is, to me, we're all screaming and yelling at each other about short-term rentals, for example. We have to get ourselves under control and really start debating in an honest, open fashion. Housing is a problem, but we're getting there. We're beginning to solve that. So is still a priority, but we have a long ways to go. And of course, the environment is something that we can never, ever forget about. Those are the simple problems. Not simple problems, but those are the major problems.
Any suggestions on how to address them?
Well, I think the issue, for example, of short-term rentals is being debated now and ultimately will come to a conclusion. The environment has to always be a priority. We have to decide that we're going to spend money on it. We're going to have to decide that we're going to follow the leadership of, for instance, the new Clean Water Committee and do what they're going to do and support them. We have to support all our town employees that are involved in the environment, make sure they have adequate resources to do it. And if they don't, then we have to decide what else not to do. In the town housing situation, we're working on it.
Thank you very much. Next, Kathy Richard.
Yes, well, I have said before that I've been very concerned about the health of the harbor, and I'm happy to see that the scallops harvest doubled this year, which must mean that we're doing something in a positive direction. But I am very concerned about the people I would call the backbone of this island, the people who are working hard, who are out there juggling several jobs, trying to decide how they're going to pay their rent, or they're going to pay exorbitant heating costs, or go to the grocery store. You can see the need in the food pantry. They keep reporting that the need goes up. At Community Preservation Committee, every year we raise the amount of money for the rental assistance program. And these folks who apply for this money, they don't want to do this. But in order to remain on Nantucket and do the vital work that they do to keep this island going, it's necessary. So I'm very interested in affordable housing for people who are working to keep the roads clear, to cook the meals at our island home. These are people who are not making tons and tons of money, but who are doing valuable work. And a lot of them are here because they want their children to grow up on Nantucket. I wish I had grown up on Nantucket. I didn't. But and I'm going to differ with Cliff about the schools. I have 2 grandchildren at Nantucket High School. What an amazing series of years they've had. They're well educated. My grandson's all set. He's going off to college, and he's they're doing a great job up there preparing the kids. Take a look at Instagram. Nantucket High School class of 2023, and look at these beautiful children and the schools that
Time, please.
Thanks, Kathy. Cliff.
Thank you. Just to address Kathy's, I don't want to confuse anybody. I'm not criticizing the school system. I mean, I'm talking about the situation right now where my son doesn't have a bathroom to go to because they keep either blowing up the toilets or I don't know what they're doing up there. And nobody's held accountable. I was up there briefly meeting with a counselor, and I saw the way these kids address the teachers and talk to the teachers. And that was done back when I was going to school. It wouldn't be allowed. So unfortunately, I don't criticize the school. I'm just trying to say, I think they need help. Anyhow, one of the biggest issues I think is town employees. I tried to provide employee housing over a year ago with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. I think everybody else, all the employers, they can, I don't say fend for themselves, but the biggest thing we have is we have to recruit people to work on this island, whether it's fire, whether it's police, and we're going to have to, I think, focus on their housing first before everybody else's. And I tried to do that, and there was no interest. So though that's one of the reasons I just don't understand. They say one thing, but they do another. So it's the landfill, like I said, the windmills, the schools, and mostly retention of town employees and recruiting of town employees, because somebody has to run the town. Thanks.
Thank you, Cliff. Tom, next.
Yeah, I agree with much of what has been said. I think affordable housing is always the number one issue. It was when I worked for the rep's office. It was the district's number one priority and a huge challenge throughout the Commonwealth. I think that the the $6.5 million override that is coming to town meeting on the 6th, and the subsequent ballot question is imperative due to the fact that the transfer fee bill has been unable for numerous reasons to have been passed by the legislature and signed by the governor. But Nantucket needs a reliable, consistent funding stream for affordable housing. As I've heard a member of the select board say, we don't lack for solutions, we lack for the money to do it. Hopefully the land is able to be procured to put it in appropriate places where affordable housing works. And then the other priorities that I would just mention quickly would be especially mental health challenges in the schools coming out of the pandemic. At the select board a couple of weeks ago was a supplemental request by CRC to provide some mental health funding that had some challenges because of some process questions. But to me, that would be a very high priority, especially for the youth. And then also just participation in town and local government and building things that build community, such as where I spend a lot of my time at the pickle and paddle courts. I think that it is time to build a indoor rec center here for the community. This was discussed at the select board last week, how much it would cost, where it would go, who would pay for it, all
please.
Majorly TBD, but I think it's very important for the mental health and for things to do for youth and seniors in the community.
Thank you, Tom. Before I move on to the second question, I would like to reiterate the request for questions from our audience, from our Zoom audience. Please use the Q&A button and fire in your questions for the candidates. The second question: what are your thoughts on the proposed changes in the structure of town governance? And we'll start with Kathy.
Okay. Well, are you talking about the town, the question of whether we continue with town meeting?
Yes.
Okay. You know, I feel that town meeting is a precious thing. It's democracy in action. I really have always treasured being able to go there. I grew up in a town, Weymouth, that had the very first town meeting form of government in this country. And so it's always been very special to me that we have an opportunity where people can go and speak their heart, speak what they think, and be part of the decision-making process for the town. Now, I feel as though there's some thought that monies can't be appropriated fast enough or other things, but you know, we can have special town meetings. They're a year apart. If we had one, we're going to have one in November. You know, I think that that's sufficient for moving money questions along. And I believe that the town meeting warrant really sees into the future. We have a lot of articles every year looking forward for the betterment of the town. I really love town meeting, and I'm totally in favor of it, town government remaining the way that it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Cliff?
Yeah, I agree. As dysfunctional as town meeting is sometimes, I had a discussion about this today. Voting in a person to represent us and then they don't represent you like they do in Washington, in my opinion, is not something I'd like to see. But unfortunately, a lot of people don't have the time for town meeting. They don't have time to meet the articles. But as it was described to me, it could be fundamental change where certain neighborhoods or certain groups of people meet and they kind of have a mini town meeting, go over what they believe, vote where they want to vote, and then send somebody as a representative, as a group, to I guess almost a mini town meeting where the representatives would give your opinions and your votes and then go from there. And that would might even be more efficient. But I would look at anything like that, but I wouldn't give up completely the ability to come together and make decisions as a town, because I think unfortunately our government shows that once they are given the power, it seems to get corrupt, in my opinion. So I don't trust them with so-called representing me without me having some kind of input directly.
Thank you. Tom?
I think this is a very important discussion that needs to be moved forward. On town meeting this year are 2 articles relating to this. One is for better or worse, is not in legal form and would not pass muster through the legislatures in the form of a home rule petition. But Mr. Barnes's article for the select board to create a committee to investigate moving to a town council form seems reasonable, a reasonable push to make it happen, either through a charter commission or through a home rule petition. But anything that would need to go to the legislature, anything that would be done, period, would have to be done in a very thoughtful, methodical process. And exchanging the town charter is a big deal and would probably be a several-year process. And I could see it possibly being something like our short-term rental work group, where maybe not, there's not an outside consultant necessarily, but there's a moderator who and then experts who come in and help write the change if that's what the community wants. I think that town meeting is great in many respects, but due to lack of participation and that a lot of folks just can't make it, as one of my colleagues here said before, it may not be the best way for Nantucket any longer. And a town council, whether it's 9 members, 7 members, elected by district, elected at large, that could be talked about and debated through this committee via Mr. Barnes's article.
Thank you. And Malcolm?
Yeah, obviously, this is a very important question for the town. And I liked Tom's response when we said if we have a group, we don't need a consultant or someone from the outside to manage it. We have enough talent right here on this island. And I've said a couple of times, we should think long and hard when we hire a consultant. There's a lot of things we can do to improve the government. I think one, I often struggle as I'm not quite sure who's in charge. And I think now, right now, we can do something to improve the way we work. My comrades on the select board, for example, look at the way our meetings run right now. We spend 2 hours talking about licensing, or we spend another hour getting staff reports. They're all doing a good job. And we also end up at the end saying, yeah, you're doing a good job. We have licensing recommendations and we almost never vote against any of the recommendation. Why don't we refocus our meetings? Why don't we refocus our meetings so the important topics, like, I hate to say it again, short-term rentals, reorganization of the HDC, those really important topics always end up at the end of the meeting. And most people are just tired and want to go home. Why don't we have something like a licensing commission? Get rid of all that. We have zoning boards, we have planning boards, we have health boards that all deal with regulatory issues. And then let us spend our valuable time talking about what are really important. All of the things my fellow candidates talked about as issues on the island, that's what the select board should be spending our time on, period. Not just listening to everybody talk and saying, oh, you're all doing a great job. Let's get down and really make some difference. Thank you.
Thank you. It's now time to move into the audience Q&A. And again, I'll request our audience out there in Zoom world, please hit that Q&A button and hit us with some questions. Question here. Am I supposed to read the name of the person who sent in the question or not?
No.
First question then. What specific steps can the town of Nantucket take to address rising sea levels? And I think that one we start now first with Cliff.
Well, if they can hold back the tide, good luck. But I think we're raising houses down on Washington Street, so I don't know if we're gonna have gondolas eventually, so maybe that can be a new industry. I saw some plan where they're gonna put a levee like New Orleans around the harbor. It seems kind of crazy. So I don't know. They built the Mad Hatter years ago, high off the ground because it used to flood down on Eastern Street, places like that. And Mad Hatter's come and gone, and the water still floods the street. So I don't think we can hold back the ocean if that's the situation. We've tried to build some walls down the Easy Street, sea walls, so that when you get a high tide, full moon, northeaster, the water doesn't come in as fast, or it's just restricted by that. But I'm not sure much more you could do to, I guess if that's the question, what are you gonna do about rising tides? Get some boats. Thanks.
Tom?
I think that coastal resiliency is very important for the assets that make up, most important, for the assets that make up Nantucket, meaning the harbor, the airport, protecting valuable town and Nantucket assets as best as possible. It's obviously very expensive. There are state monies and federal monies for helping with those programs. And there are some places where that may not be appropriate on Nantucket, and depending on what the cost is. But I'm not quite sure what the specifics of protecting the harbor would be, but all options need to be considered based on a balance of cost and what the future for Nantucket is, as we are looking into further climate change and rising sea levels.
Thank you. Malcolm?
Well, I have to compliment you on the question. It's almost unanswerable. It's a really tough one because, we don't control the weather. I don't think any of us speak with God. We do have a committee that's looking at that, coastal resiliency, and they're doing a great job. But I think Tom was right. We have to really look at the balance. I mean, there's discussions now of spending $36 million on the bluff. Well, of course, this is Nantucket. So $36 million probably means $50 million. And the question is, who's going to pay for it? So we have to be really, really careful of not just jumping into things. We need careful study. I wished I could answer your question. I'm sorry.
Thanks. Kathy?
Yeah, it is a tough one. A few years ago, they did some work on the jetty, supposedly, the Army Corps of Engineers, and I have $60-70 million. They worked on those things out there. I have come in several times on the boat recently, and the East Jetty is underwater again. The tides are coming up. I think that people need to begin to, look at raising buildings, which is what they're doing. And I always think that the people who went to sea and hunted whales knew where to build houses. They're up on Orange Street. They're up beyond Orange Street. Nobody who has a healthy respect for the ocean ever would have built right down on the water unless you were having a candle factory or something down there. I live on a hill in Tom Nevers. I feel very safe up here. I can see the ocean, but it's not coming anywhere near me. I don't know what to say. It's a tragedy. We lost the VFW down here. In 2 years, we went from having picnics behind it to it being gone after a couple of bad winters. You can't predict what side of the island is going to get hit. One side may build up a little bit and the other one go out to sea. It's very, very difficult. And I don't think we have any big solutions. Sorry.
Thank you. That was a tough question. Next question. Regarding spending north of 50 million on an assisted living facility, taking emotions out of the equation, is spending 50, 60, 70 plus million for an assisted living facility a good use fiscally of taxpayer money? And we'll start with Tom.
That's up to the voters in Nantucket to decide via town meeting. The current location of our island home obviously has some issues due to coastal resiliency challenges and flooding. And from what I understand, that it would be best served in another location. But that conversation would have to be debated on town meeting floor and with the requisite stakeholders to see whether Nantucket wants to make those expenditures to rebuild at a tune of the questioner's numbers.
Malcolm?
I think $50 million, and I said it before, now in Nantucket money, 50 million means 60 million by the time it's done, or 70 million. And I hate to vote against something for sick people or old people. I hate to vote against something like supporting affordable housing, mental health, but there comes a time where you just have to be practical. $50 million for a population of some 20 people, to me, is kind of ridiculous. If the town and you as taxpayers and community members want to spend $50+ million on something, fine. However, then you have to say, what are we not going to spend $50 million on? We can't just keep overriding and overriding and overriding. It's going to be like the Nantucket sleigh ride. Remember the Nantucket sleigh ride? It's going to be like the override sleigh ride. So we have to get back to basics and decide, yes, it's important, but if we do it, what are we not going to do? Thank you.
Kathy?
Yeah, well, from my years of doing risk management for the town, I may have a different position about it. I think we should have sold our island home many years ago when we had to turn it into an enterprise fund. At that point, we might have been able to sell it. I believe we're the only municipality in the town, in the state, that owns and operates a nursing home. And the reason other towns and municipalities don't do it is because it's an enormous liability. If something horrible happens, the family would not just be suing the home; they'd be suing the town. I think it's a very scary situation. We're kind of stuck with it now. It's kind of like an albatross, I feel, because it's too expensive to upgrade it. It's too expensive to move it. It's very difficult to think about, and it's very expensive to go there as it is now. Can you imagine if we expended another $50 million on the home, what the rates would be? Who could afford to go there? I just feel as though our time of owning a nursing home should have come to an end, and maybe, it's up to the town, the people at town meeting voting, but I am very wary of the whole situation.
Thank you. Cliff, over to you.
Yeah, I was on the Island Home Committee years ago. We went up to Holyoke, Mass. and looked at the Spoken Hub building they had for the elderly priests and nuns at the Catholic Church there. And it was a great little system. I think the Island Home has been 6 to 7% of our budget forever, probably the last 100 years. We put it into an enterprise fund, you're correct. And that's just to isolate the accounting. That's all an enterprise fund is, to show how much money it costs. And then we acted like there was no money for it. It had a budget before we put it in an enterprise fund. So we did do an override, I think, last year for 6 or 7 million. So there should be plenty of money because it's not a debt exclusion, it's an override. And I think it's usually only 3 to 4 or 5 million a year. So we should have plenty of money. It's up to the taxpayer if they still want an island home. $50 million. Like I said, I looked at that Spoken Hub type of a facility. And I think we could do a lot better. Don't get caught up in this 30B bidding where only so many people can work on it and so many people can build it, and we get charged excessively. I think we could all work together as a community if we were going to build a new one and build it a lot cheaper. But it's up to the taxpayers to vote it in. I know it's one thing to say you don't want one, but once you get older, your parents get older, it's awful convenient that that's the last stop. They're right here. They're not off island. So like I said, it's up to the voter to decide.
Thanks, Cliff. Next question is another easy one. What are your thoughts on the wind farm? And we're going to start with Malcolm.
We don't know what we don't know. And like everything in the world, you can read, there's this debate about the whales. Well, some people say it's harming the whales. The federal agency says it's not harming the whales. You know, as an expert on experts, experts are experts, and they're sometimes wrong. I think there's just too many unknown answers for us to be taking any risk on it. Now, like I said before, you hate to vote against some things. I mean, to vote against renewable energy, to be against renewable energy, I can imagine the emails that I'm going to get tomorrow morning about that. But the problem is we just don't know. And 30 years from now, when it's all done, the technology will change. I would love to support it. I would love to support our own home, but I can't. I would love to support the wind farm for the perspective of renewable energy, but I have great concerns.
Thanks. Kathy.
Yeah, I was looking at the map this morning of how close it's you know, it's right out here. It's going to be coming along between Martha's Vineyard and over here. It's a spring day. It's really windy out today. Can you imagine going out there to work on building these things? I mean, I can't conceive of how they're going to get them in the water given the conditions that are off of our coastline here. Number one. And second of all, Neville and I have been talking about alternative sources of energy for our house. A windmill's the last thing in the world we put up. You know, solar is a good way to go. You can build it low to the ground. We have vast areas here on Nantucket. We have a lot of sunshine. I think we're overlooking a really good source of renewable energy. I'm just worried about these monstrosities out here. You know, when you fly across the country and you're going over the flatlands where they're growing wheat and soy and whatever, and there are a lot of windmills, but there's nothing there. It's just flat land, and it's these windmills spinning, spinning, spinning. It's a different story out here in the North Atlantic off of Nantucket. And I'm very concerned about the whole project, and I can't even imagine how they're going to build them.
Thank you. Cliff, over to you.
I think this is a prime example of the last question of should we still have town meeting? This is a situation where our representatives went and sold us out, and basically the federal government, Julian Sear, Dylan Fernandez, jumped on this bandwagon of green energy, and all these areas have been basically rented before, in my opinion, any of us even had a say, or before they did the due diligence on the environmentals, whether it's the whales, whether it's shellfish that grows there, anything. They didn't do a study with the ILS. I take care of the ILS at the airport. It projects 18 miles out into the ocean. I believe the windmills are just 12 miles out. It did have an aviation company, crew, advisory, whatever you want to call them. They did a study and verified that. So they've basically gone ahead and leased out this land, put us on the hook for it before they did their work, before they followed the proper procedure. I know this thing is in court. And then on top of it, the Board of Selectmen signed, I think it's a good neighbor agreement, which basically gave away all our rights. I'm not even sure how they legally did that, because I would think something like that would come to town meeting. And even if it didn't have to come to town meeting, I would have demanded as a selectman that it come to town meeting. You don't go and give away your legal rights as a town to something that dynamic where if these windmills fall over, the company goes bankrupt, we can't even sue them. It's crazy. These people should be bonded, but it should be stopped, and they should do it the legal way. They haven't followed the process. And I was on the finance committee when we looked at windmills here, and they just don't work. At least, I mean, like we talked about solar. Well, solar, hopefully it'll progress, but the windmill energy, it's going to cost you, $2,000 a month to run your refrigerator. It's not cheap energy. And
Please.
yeah, thank you.
God, I was assuming you were saying my turn.
Yes.
Yeah, offshore wind energy is a major priority by the federal government and several states, all across the United States and throughout the world. And it is happening. So I think that the priorities for Nantucket would be to maximize the benefits, meaning the host agreements that are come through the Community Foundation and that have been entered into, and if there are any future ones, and to minimize any potential downsides, such as when the last briefing at the select board, the company came and they talked about ALS lighting and making sure that the paint was the right color, so it would be less visible from the shore, and also about mitigation for harming tourism, and also given Nantucket's historical nature and its place in Nantucket Sound and the surrounding waters, to, as much as possible, mitigate those potential downsides to something that is going to happen out there as those leases have been and are being developed.
Thank you. Malcolm.
Yes. You already asked me about windmills.
I already asked you.
Yes,
Okay. So I get done with that.
that's okay.
Everybody's answered that.
I can talk about whatever you want.
Okay. We'll move on to the next question then. Oh, it's easy. What is your specific view on the short-term rental issue? And we'll start with Cliff.
Well, we've talked about this for several years. I was hoping our committee, maybe I'm confused, was going to come up with some sort of a solution from last year. I know there's a citizens article, I think it's 60, that's been submitted this year. It's just a can of worms, like everything else in Nantucket. It started out small. Local people rented their houses in the summer to make enough money to maybe pay their taxes and insurance and subsidize their income a little bit. And now these big conglomerates have seen Nantucket, and they see the kind of rentals they can achieve, and they're buying up houses and making a great living. So it's just another one of those things that's gotten out of control in Nantucket. And I think it's just, like I said, a can of worms, because I've stated the fact that I don't know how we can rent our houses when they're not commercial. Then they don't have fire escapes, they don't have sprinklers, but yet Airbnb's done that all around the country. So I'm confused by things like that have been implemented, just like Uber cabs have been implemented, and now chits for cabs are worthless, where you used to have to pay $150,000 for a cab chit up in Boston, or medallion, whatever you wanted to call it. Yeah, somewhere behind the scenes, we've morphed into these bed and breakfast private entities, and it's, like I said, hopefully they can come up with some sort of a agreement. But it's a big moneymaker for Nantucket. It's how people come here and visit. It's our industry now in Nantucket is unfortunately short-term rentals. So hopefully the committee comes up with a solution or some debate points, and then we can all vote on it.
Thank you. Tom.
So as I said in my opening statement, I am the affordable housing advocate on the short-term rental work group. And I just want to note that I do not speak for the rest of the work group. But I will say a few things about my own personal take. not going too much into the history about how the work group was established and all that, but given where we are and we're kind of in the middle of our work, we've had 10 meetings over 30 plus hours. We've spoken with town council several times. We've spoken with Judy Barrett, who's a consultant, a land use expert, planning expert, who's actually going to be writing whatever we come up with in a form of a zoning or general bylaw. We've taken in data. We are waiting for the data consultant that the town hired to provide us a report approximately around May 4th. We will be finished up our work, hopefully by the end of June, and then get it into some kind of written form for special town meeting in November. And I am heartened by the process. There's a lot of stuff swirling out there about 59, 60, and 61, especially 60. But that is not necessarily correlated with our work group. We are subject to open meeting law, and all our debates take place in a public meeting on the Zoom setting such as this, except for our 2 in-person meetings, and which we have another one on May 4th, which will be extended. And I'm feeling good that we're going to come out with a balanced policy or policies to send to special town meeting that special town meeting will be able to support. Obviously, it's incumbent upon us to make sure that those are palatable to. Yep. And I would just say we are looking at quickly, I would just say we're looking at several policy levers, including, and I'm not endorsing any of these, of course, potential caps, limiting time for rentals, limiting rentals to natural persons. A big court case an Attorney General approved a bylaw in Great Barrington, which approved a natural persons definition in Massachusetts. So these are the kind of things that we're looking at. And I would implore the community to allow us to finish up our work and send a something to special town meeting in November. Thank you.
Thank you. Malcolm.
Well, I've certainly agonized about coming to an opinion on any of those 3 articles. I think one thing is clear. I'm actually in a way ashamed of our community. We've certainly not done this very well. And I question the activity of both sides. We hear statements such as reckless and irresponsible, and then fear of losing town revenue based on unvetted data. This is not acceptable civil discussion. I think interesting, you may feel it's unusual for me to say, but I really compliment Ms. Williams and Ms. Kilvert for proposing their articles, because they're actually the only ones that had the courage to move forward when after months of absolutely nothing happening. And I think the select board, we may have failed a little bit here, because when the working group failed to meet their deadline, I think we should have just said, thank you for your volunteering. You've done the best you could and disbanded it. And we as a select board should take it on ourselves. Like I said, instead of hours and hours of licensing meetings, we could have been discussing this. We could have done it in 2 or 3 open sessions, I believe. Other towns have done that. And I think that was a mistake. And I would encourage, well, I thought at one point I was going to mention about coming up on Meet the Articles, where I was at first thought that some of those zoning articles would be talked, because the Board of Selectmen would have said, okay, let's not talk about this. Let's not endorse any articles, wait for the working group. But yet last week we had the town council come and made some comments about the articles. And there was no real chance for debate or counter debate or questioning to him from the people that had proposed those articles that he criticized. So I think it would have been appropriate today if in fact those people had an opportunity to give their side and version and meet the articles. And I'm sorry we didn't do that.
Thank you. Kathy, you have the final word.
Yes, well, okay, on those articles that are on this, for the town meeting coming up, 60, 59, and 58, I think. I like what John Giorgio said about Article 60, in that there has to be implied grandfathering for people who have homes. Perhaps a lot of people have homes here that they rent out during the summer. They can't live in them for 6 months during the winter because they're not heated. We have a lot of cottages and homes like that. So I like what he said. It gave me more hope that it would be a situation that would work out. But we do have this short-term rental group that's been working, I think, working hard. And they're going to have a special town meeting. I would like to see the articles that Linda and Emmy have proposed be sent over to the town meeting, the special town meeting in November, so that we can really look at all aspects. I was at the town meeting. I was at the select board several weeks ago when we had the report from Granicus, which is the company that the short-term rental group is using. They were very underwhelming. It was not what I thought it was going to be. And thank goodness we had some very astute people in the real estate business call in and make comments at that meeting. From what I could gather, there's nothing that can be done this year. We're about to jump into the season, in a few weeks, basically. And so I think that it would be best to have all of those articles go to the November special town meeting so that they can all be mulled over and worked, and the work group put their report in as well. And we can come up with a program that will work. It's very difficult. And it's maybe becoming bigger than it should be. So that's my take on it. It should all go to November and work on it.
And please.
Thank you very much. On to the next question. And again, I'm reading these in the order that I'm receiving them. And it's a long one. Our Island Home has 1 star out of 5 for quality of care. Our Island Home administration attributes much of the low rating due to housing issues. Is it a good idea to build a facility and not include staff housing? If employee housing is included, what about other town of Nantucket employee housing? And we'll start with Tom.
I think absolutely. If the town has land it can use, or there's a spot that could be, or there's land that could be swapped with another conservation organization or something like that, absolutely. I was told by a select board member recently that there were 52 open positions in the town, and there were 30% turnover last year in town staff. As my colleagues here have echoed previously in other questions, that is a major issue. And one of the priorities of the select board and their charge is efficient delivery of town services. And without be able to housing employees, department heads, et cetera, the town is not going to be able to do that. So that would be at the very top of, I know is at the very top of the current select board, and would certainly be a priority of mine if I were elected.
Thank you. Malcolm McNabb.
Yeah, I agree. It's a priority of everyone and a priority of the select board. And the select board has worked hard, and in constant meetings, whenever I'm talking to my colleagues, we talk about the need for employee housing. And in some of the present negotiations with employees, that's being discussed. I can't disagree with anything that's been said.
Thank you, Kathy. Richie.
Yes, employee housing is vital. I don't know that the hospital would be opening its doors anymore if they hadn't thought ahead 20, 25 years ago and built all the housing that they did. And they still need more. It's astonishing. It's a long time ago, at least 20 years ago, there was a group, Nantucket Educational Trust, and they decided that they were going to, on their own, build housing for the teachers. And that's where those houses over on Cow Pond Lane behind the football field came from. It was a grassroots group of people. I think it was headed by some prominent people who live and work here and own businesses, but they did it, and it's been very, very successful. It didn't have anything to do with the town. The town has got to follow that that example and come through with housing for its people. Because, you know, I worked in the finance department. Everybody who worked there stayed with it as a career because you got a good pension when you retired. It was very good. Now, every time I go in the finance department building down there at 37 Washington Street, it's new people. People aren't staying. People aren't making it a career, and it's a good career. And I'm sure that housing is a big reason why they're not. It's pitiful because these are people making very important decisions about our finances. And it's that way throughout the whole town. So yes, big priority.
Thank you. Mr. Williams, you'll have the final word on this one.
Yeah, as I stated earlier, last year's town meeting, Article 63, I spent about a year trying to work with the Affordable Housing Trust in the town for employee housing. I had a piece of land I spent almost $1 million on. I put forth plans and proposals for affordable housing, turnkey houses. It would cost $4 million for 10 houses with mortgages under $3,000 a month, and they turned me down. So again, we talk about this stuff all the time, and then when they're given the opportunity, they didn't do it. So, and that was just the beginning. We could have done more. So that's why I run, because I'm confused by we say one thing and we do another. So yeah, that the main thing, like I said, when we first started this event was to recruit town employees to focus on housing for the town. And like I said, I've tried to do that, and I didn't just talk about it. I spent a lot of money, and we didn't go forward with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. The next question. Clearly, the short-term rental controversy can be very polarizing. What do you think the working group has done well, and what do you think they can do better in order to help define a path forward? And we'll start with Malcolm McNabb.
Well, we've sort of covered that. I mean, obviously they're a lot later than they should have been. And I'm sorry, I can't accept the fact that we're just waiting for data and more data and more data. It was an excuse for a long time. I'm always afraid, as someone that spent most of my life dealing with data and analyzing data, that with all the biases concerned, we'll have, like I've said before, we'll end up with people saying, these are the conclusions about which my data, and not these are the data about which I base my conclusions. I'm not sure we need more data. We have, obviously, we're legal risk at the present time based on our present zoning law. That's clear. That needs, I would like to have seen that resolved much earlier. And like I said, I think the select board should have done a lot more on this, not just push it off, not just hire consultants. The working group struggled. They obviously couldn't do it for a lot of reasons. That's why I said what we should have done is just had our own public hearings and come to something reasonable. I'm not particularly criticizing the working group. There was just too much emotion, too much bias on both sides for them to, I think, work efficiently. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy?
Yeah, it's a very, very difficult problem. You know, you almost wonder, is there actually a solution, or is there a way to enforce anything on this? I do feel as though Article 60 is on the right path, and I need some more work. That's why I'm thinking it should be tabled until November. But I did happen to see the presentation that their consulting firm gave, and I was not impressed. You know, they were relying on Airbnb and VRBO to track our rentals when most of these rentals out here go through real estate firms. And as I said before, fortunately, some of the real estate people dialed in and had some very good comments. I hope that the short-term rental group has some real estate people on it, because they know what's actually going on and how to handle it. It's I'm eager for November. I want to see what they're going to bring forward. After seeing their consultant company, though, I'm not particularly optimistic. So that's it.
Thank you. Cliff Williams,
Yeah, can you repeat the question?
clearly the short-term rental controversy can be very polarizing. What do you think the working group has done well, and what do you think they can do better in order to help define a path forward?
I don't know what they've done. I'm not up to speed on what they've done. Like I said, I was hoping they'd come up with an answer, but apparently they haven't. I think what we should do, I think we should implement a policy in this town where we can only have 2 meetings. And then by the 3rd meeting, we have to do something. All we do is have a meeting. I work for the federal government. We have meetings and then we have more meetings and then we never do anything. So it just drives me a little crazy. Like Malcolm was trying to make that point earlier. At some point, you just have to move and make a decision or do something, even if it's wrong, and learn from your mistakes and keep on going. But hopefully they can come up with an answer soon for us. Thanks.
Thank you. Everybody answered on that, right?
I didn't, Scott.
Okay, Tom. Yeah, thanks.
So one thing about the short-term rental work group is that consensus is considered 7 of 9 of us. And I tend to personally kind of agree with Malcolm that the data may or may not show anything, and maybe we could do it anyway, but this is what the group wants. And it's already gone through a process. The consultant, who is not Granicus for this, it is Process First, who is compiling data from VRBO, et cetera, as Kathy mentioned, but also through NARAB, through the Nantucket Realtors. And that data will be gathered and presented to us sometime in early May. And our work group is a makeup. There are no real estate professionals on the work group, per town council weighing in and saying that was not allowed. But it is a diverse group. There are year-round residents. There are off-island folks. Nantucket Together has a representative. Act Now has a representative. There is a Board of Health representative who's non-voting. It is a wide group, which makes it interesting. And I think that when we come up with a policy or policies, that to get to 7 of 9, that it is a pretty wide slice of folks who have a stake in all of this. For the questioners, what we could do better, I think always communications. I think that we'll probably send out, from what I understand, if we can come to consensus, a letter on where we're at, and saying a statement about especially 60, but 59 and 61 as well. And that hopefully will give some direction to the community about where we're at and why the work that we're doing is important for us to finish what we started.
Thank you. I have one more question. So I'm putting out a last call to all of our Zoom participants. If you have a question, please hit the Q&A button and send them in. We'll be wrapping up shortly. The next question is, should solar panels be allowed on the roofs of all buildings? And it's Kathy Richens' turn to go first.
Okay, my screen is doing something funny, but I hope you can hear me. You can hear fine. Okay. I think that I don't understand why a roof couldn't handle a solar panel. I know you have to, put new shingling on and that sort of thing. But from what I've heard, once you get your roof, structure sound, that the solar panels can go on. Now the question is, in like the core district and the historic district, is that acceptable? Because I don't know what HDC would have to say about us, for instance, putting solar panels on some of those really older, well-preserved homes downtown. I really don't know. But for people outside of town, I can't imagine why you wouldn't be able to put solar panels on your roof. Yeah. That's it for me on that.
Thank you. Cliff Williams.
Yeah, I think this gets to the same situation we just talked about with meetings and committees. And I know that they've had rules for solar panels, and then a lot of people get turned down because they face the street. I thought we were going to form a committee, unfortunately, and resolve and finally make laws to determine where they can go, where they can't go, or if maybe it's just on case by case basis. So hopefully we can develop solar energy a lot quicker. It's a lot less intrusive than the wind energy, and absolutely, I don't think it can be in the core district, historic district, but hopefully technology can advance quick enough, fast enough, and we can have them on roofs where you hopefully can't see them from the street. I would be for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom Dixon.
Yeah, I think as long as it, as my colleague said, as long as it meets the definition to be okayed by HDC, and it's not in violation of any clear regulation on Nantucket, I think it should be. Maybe there's a further discussion with Lauren Sinatra from the energy department on in the town of Nantucket, and NPT and the HDC and all that on how to make that more efficient for homeowners to go about procuring solar panels for their homes. Maybe it's an HDC bottleneck. I'm not sure, but I think it is important for homeowners to have that option if they want to save on energy, or for resiliency matters, or for whatever their motivations are for procuring solar panels for their homes.
Thank you. Malcolm McNabb.
Yes, let's not make it complicated. We don't need a committee. We don't need a consultant. The HDC has rules. Let's just put them on where we can.
Thank you. So I did get one more question. This will be, I think, the last one. Another long one. I'm sorry, but a lot of this conversation has felt esoteric with concerns about windmill or short-term rentals, coastal resilience, etc. If elected, what are the 2 ideas, proposals you'd like to work on and accomplish that will impact the community at large, the common resident? And Cliff Williams, it's your turn to go first.
Thank you. Great question. I mean, like I talked about at the beginning, we still haven't resolved, I don't think, the landfill. I put in an article in for an incinerator years ago, and we just haven't capitalized on that. I tried to do affordable housing. We haven't capitalized on that. I think maybe it's time to get a fresh start with town administration. I just think we need some new eyes on the ball around here. We need some new ideas. It just, we just go in circles. The same things just keep going round and round and get recycled. And like I just said, we have meetings over meetings. In the Island Home was the best example of that. If I had $1 for every time they had an Island Home meeting for the last 15 years, I could retire. It's just, we have meetings, we never do anything. So if nothing else, I would try to just move forwards and make us just act, even if it's wrong, I hate to say, but just do something and move forward and get things done. It's just, we spend money on studies and then we never do anything, it seems like.
Thank you. Tom Dixon.
Yeah, I think two things that are, well, I mentioned one of them before, but are general to kind of everyday residents, as the questioner mentioned, would be, one is continuing the conversation around streamlining social services on Nantucket. I work for Nantucket Food, Fuel, and Rental Assistance, NIFRA as we call it. And we are starting to integrate with other organizations about food security and locally grown food and agriculture on Nantucket on the land banks properties and furthering those discussions. And I think those are things that would benefit island residents. And then my other one would be, I think there's a lot of stuff for younger kids, school-age kids to do here, but there is not a lot to do for older kids, teenagers, and young adults. Young adults meaning, kind of the restaurant bar age. And I think that's unfortunate. As somebody who doesn't drink and has had alcoholism in his family, I think there needs to be more things to do that aren't that. And I think recreation, as I mentioned before, this potential indoor rec center, and also further utilizing recreational spaces for things to do for kids and young adults is a discussion we really need to further down the road.
Thank you. Malcolm McNabb.
Could you repeat the question so I get it specifically?
Sure. I'll read the last half. If elected, what are the 2 ideas, proposals you'd like to work on and accomplish that will impact the community at large, the common resident?
This isn't exactly an answer, but I think it's how we can get things going and impact the community. Is the community itself has more power than you think. When you go to select board and we have public comment, don't let us just sit there and shake our heads. Write your editorials, write your letters to the newspaper, volunteer for various committees, push us, because we could get very lazy. And like we said, and all my colleagues have said, we talk a lot, we have meetings, we don't need consultants, we need to listen to you. So if you want to push this government along and make it open and benefit us all, get involved in the community. And the people that are elected off to the elective office and put on boards, push them. Don't get into groupthink, challenge, push. That's the best thing I think I can encourage to make this community better.
Thank you. Kathy?
Well, I think that for your average regular residents here on Nantucket, you need to have a home to live in that you can afford to live in, that you can bring up a family in, a home that you can afford to live in and enjoy and still have a good quality of life, be able to have good food, heat it. And so many people out here can't do that. And that's a crying shame. I think that it starts with the affordable housing. We need to do everything we can to get those units finished. I drove around today looking at some of the affordable housing projects, and they're like half done. Let's get them done. Let's finish them up. Let's get folks living in these houses, kids playing in the backyard. I think that would be very important. People would be able to take a job, keep a job, make a career out of it, make Nantucket their real home, not a place where they're just hoping to get by. Another thing that is a bugaboo for me. There are a number of areas in Nantucket that do not have fire hydrants. And I think that's a big danger. The house that burned down out in Dionis, no fire hydrants. The one on West Creek Lane, West York Lane that burnt down, there was a fire hydrant, didn't work. They had to go over by the mill to get water. In the meantime, the house was destroyed. I think that we need to do, I hate to say it, but have a group to look at where there are fire hydrants and where there are not fire hydrants. It's very frightening in certain parts of this island. They get very, very dry with brush, not to have any fire hydrants that are close by to put out a fire. It's a worrisome thing for a lot of families live in these areas. So that's my big thing for today. I'm not hearing you.
Sorry. Thanks. We've reached the point in the meeting where we're out of questions and it's time for you all to present your closing arguments. So we'll go in the same order, starting with Tom, and you'll have 2 minutes to make your final pitch. So over to you, Tom.
Thank you, Scott. members of the Civic League Executive Board, for having us today for our candidacies for the Nantucket Select Board. I am running because I think I can offer three main things. One is my experience as legislative liaison to Nantucket for the State House of Representatives, my nonprofit work, my volunteer work, and as a member of the community. I think I'm ready on day one to get ready in meetings. Obviously, when you're elected, then you start the next day. Malcolm just went through that. And I think that I have very good established relationships with members of the community and with nonprofit leaders and their teams. And third, I'm also a consensus builder. And I think the select board lends itself to those who can ably navigate those waters. Not running for mayor, of course. And this is about working with your colleagues as best as possible to find the way forward on these issues that Nantucket faces. I would just quickly highlight three main issues: affordable housing, building community, and through many forms, including recreation, as I mentioned a few times, and civic participation, very important, furthering the discussion in that. And also this change in town government, furthering the discussion in that as the town moves forward with that. I thank you all and wish all the candidates good luck.
Thank you. Malcolm McNabb.
Yes, working with your colleagues is an important part of being on the select board, but also important is disagreeing with them at times. And not all, being collaborative, speaking that together, that's wonderful. But sometimes you just have to stand up and say, I disagree with you. Like, what else can I can tell you about myself? I've been on the Board of Health for 12 years. I've been on the select board for 6 months, so you know me a little bit. And I'm not going to change. What I would really want you all to do, as I said before, get involved in this community. That's the way it will get improved. It's a community-run town, not just the elected officials. Get involved. Go out there. Give us hell if you have to. Vote. That's what I'm telling you to do. And that's what I appreciate you do. Of course, I'd like you to vote for me. If you disagree with me, fine. Vote for someone else. But I hope you know me and trust me, and I will always think of you first. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathleen Richin, your final argument.
Yes. Well, I want to thank the Civic League. This was an interesting approach, doing it all by Zoom. I wasn't certain I'd be comfortable with it, but it turned out it was just fine. So thank you very much. I think that you've heard that I have a lot of history with the town, a lot of experience and knowledge, and I've worked in negotiations and conflict resolution over the years, successfully, I believe. And I hope you'll take that into consideration. Also, those who know me know that, well, obviously I stuck with the town for a very long time, but when I start doing something, I stay with it. I have been a volunteer at the Hospital Thrift, for instance, for many, many years. I have been a member of my church, an active member of my church since 1989 when I moved here. Love being over at the wreaths and the trees, helping out there and participating in that at the Whaling Museum. And for 20 years, Linda Williams and I brought the Christmas pageant to the Congregational Church, and it was not always easy. And with any luck, we're going to do it, be back this year after a big, long COVID break. But I just want you to know that I will stay with this job if elected. When I do something, I stay with it and do my best to make everything work. As issues come up, who knows what's going to come up tomorrow? We just don't know. But I'm ready to be an effective member of the Select Board. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Williams, you're up.
Yeah, I'd like to also say thank you to the Civic League and to the rest of the candidates. I think this is really our last best chance to turn things around. The landfill, the roads, the fundamental way we run the government, whether or not we finally address employee housing. there's just a lot of issues. Like I said, for 10 years, these things have gone on, and I feel like a lot of them haven't been addressed. I was on the finance committee for 10 years. I was on the fire department committee. I was on Island Home committee. I think I bring a lot to the table, and I look for your vote, and hopefully we can resolve some of these problems. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tom Dixon, Malcolm McNabb, Kathy Richin, Clifford Williams, thank you for your service. Thank you for participating today. We wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
Now it's
Thank
time. Now it's time to move on to the two candidates for the Land Bank Commissioner position.
I'm going to take a walk first.
Sure. So, Jackie, this is your cue to pop the agenda up there briefly. We've got Alan Reinhard and Kelly Steffen as the two candidates. It's a short agenda. If you have any questions, for all of our Zoom participants, if you have any questions for the Land Bank Commissioner candidates, please put them up in the Q&A right away. We're going to give each candidate 2 minutes to introduce themselves. I'm going to ask them a question. They'll answer that, and then we'll move into audience Q&A before they make their final pitch. But we'll be done pretty quickly. So let's see, going in alphabetical order. Alan, if you could go first, 2 minutes on your qualifications.
Thank you. I first visited Nantucket as a teenager back in 1961. I've been a year-round resident for the last, since 1990, so the last 32 years. And during the last 32 years, I've worked for the Conservation Foundation as their Moorlands Ranger. One of the things that I learned as ranger for the Conservation Foundation is the importance of the open space of the conservation lands here on Nantucket. What drew me here originally was a sense of community and the fact that we had all these open spaces. I remember renting horses and being able to ride down to the South Shore from the McGrady barn on Nantucket Road there. And when I moved here in 1990, things had changed. Well, things have changed considerably over the years. 20 years ago, I was elected to the Land Bank Commission, and that's continued my education as far as learning about the island, learning about its environment, and so on. The land bank has now grown to become the island's second largest landowner, with a purpose and mission of providing public access to our islands, the harbors, the ponds, the open spaces, and also to provide recreational activities and opportunities for farming and agriculture. The work of the land bank, I think, has been instrumental in keeping the island, keeping a sense of the island, as I recall it, from the 60s and 70s and 80s. And the work of there are 7 other conservation organizations as well. So the work of all the conservation groups on the island has been very important. I've walked all of the conservation properties on the island. I'm quite familiar with the properties, and I have a vision for what might happen, or what could happen. Let me put it that way.
Thank you. Alan, your time's up. Thank you.
Right. Thank you.
Kelly Steffen, over to you, please.
Yeah, thanks. Echoing everyone else, thanks for hosting this, and thank you, candidates, for being here. This is a new foray for me, kind of into local governance. I think I've always anticipated or desired to be more involved. I've never, living in any community, I've always found a way to be involved in kind of taking care of my neighbors and being able to speak to their needs. And the land bank, as Alan mentioned, being the second largest landowner, it plays a big role in the future of Nantucket. I've lived on Nantucket now for 7 years, but I've been lucky enough to come here my whole life. I'm 33. And in kind of, we're at a critical moment. I think the land bank in its inception was at a critical moment, kind of anticipating the directions the island could go and trying to preserve something that we also value, and that being open space. I think we're at a new critical moment where we have to think about the role, especially the roles of all our community entities, especially the land bank being one of the largest landowners, one of the kind of having the most sway on the future, and finding new and kind of collaborative ways to address the challenges that the island's facing at the moment.
Thanks. If elected to the Land Bank Commission, what would be your top priority? And Kelly, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I meant to incorporate this into my intro. I grew up in Vermont as well. I've been coming here my whole life, but when I was first asked why I was running for the land bank, I kind of paused, not just because I couldn't answer the question, but because it seemed so obvious. In Vermont, it was kind of ingrained in us to value conserved land, and not only the reasons for it, but we experienced it. Growing up in Vermont, we got to experience why this was so important. And growing up too, every time I described Nantucket to somebody, I would praise the land bank and the various land conservation entities and their role in preserving over half the island. What I'm most passionate about, I think we will continue to work on land management and programming and its strategic acquisitions, as well as recreation, creating areas for year-round and seasonal families and individuals to access. But I think where I'm most excited is agriculture. I've worked in the food system and food insecurity world on Nantucket for the last few years. I worked at the Nantucket Food Pantry for 3 years, and I'm currently working as a consultant for all the food security nonprofits of Nantucket. So I think furthering our agricultural use, kind of lending to, and that lends to like a stronger economy. Food sovereignty is a big issue right now globally. And we're in a really unique place where we could, not only are we doing amazing work already, but we could further that work, and we could create jobs, we could keep more money in our local economy, and we could be getting healthier food on the plates of our neighbors and community members.
Thank you, Kelly. Alan Reinhardt?
Yeah. The land bank has really stepped up the work that we're doing throughout the community. We've been very involved with the coastal resilience plan that the town is working on. We own a significant amount of coastal properties, and we've taken a leadership role along with the town and the work that Vince Murphy is doing as far as the coastal resistance plan is involved. As one of the largest landowners on the island, we manage our properties, I would say, quite well. We have extensive trail systems. We have put in the Cross Island Trail system. We're working on other trails on other properties as we acquire them. One of the things that the land bank does well is we manage our properties. I would say all the conservation groups do the same. They manage their properties because the land bank has the resources. We have the maintenance crews to keep our trails cleared. We provide agricultural opportunities for farmers on Nantucket, and that, of course, means more open space for the farms that exist here. So those are some of the things that I would like to continue working with the land bank on.
Thank you. Another question for both of you. How could you propose increasing the opportunity for residents and visitors to engage in more recreation and agriculture at land bank properties? And Alan, we'll start with you.
Great. I think the land bank has been doing an exceptional job of that, particularly in the last couple of years. As we've opened new properties, the Easy Street Park, the Creeks Overlook Preserve, out at the west end of the island on the pond out there, we've built a boardwalk. So I would say that with the maintenance of our properties, with the management of our properties, we have been offering opportunities for exploring the island, getting familiar with the different environments of the island, and also opportunities for recreation.
Thank you. Kelly?
Yeah, I think as Alan indicated, they've already done a great job of creating the infrastructure around navigating these areas. I think figuring out how to make that information more accessible. Like, does everyone know where to access digital maps and hard copies of maps? Does everybody know where the kind of day-to-day programming is, where they can find that information about day-to-day programming on the various properties? I think there's also opportunity for collaboration with different entities, and maybe entities that are more, well, obviously entities that are more focused on recreation, and kind of creating partnerships that in turn increase awareness about all this beautiful land that Alan and the rest of the land bank team has done so good at taking care of and creating.
Thanks. Good for you. Okay, time for closing arguments. You'll each have 2 minutes just to make your closing argument to the viewers. Alan, we'll start with you.
Okay. 20 years ago, as I said, I was elected to the Land Bank Commission, and over the years, the Land Bank has provided public access throughout the island to the ponds, to the different open areas, to the woodlands throughout Nantucket. I think we've done a great job as far as advertising our properties, advertising the opportunities. If you've been out walking our properties, you've seen we've put up signs. There's a map on them. There's a little QR code that we have on each of those property entrances where you can literally aim your smartphone at it and push the button, and up will pop a description of that particular property. I'm very proud of the vision and the work that conservation groups have done over the years to make Nantucket the place that it is. I want to continue the work and the accomplishments of the land bank, and I ask for your vote to re-elect me to the Land Bank Commission for another term. Thank you.
So I can go ahead. So I should also throw in at an expertise level, I did go to University of Vermont at College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, where I studied agroeconomics and community development. And I'm currently in a Master's of Architecture program where not only am I studying, but I'm just enthralled and in love with this idea of kind of what are the assets and parts of a community that make it livable and sustainable and can work on behalf of the biggest group of people. Furthering that, I'm part of a generation that's unrepresented in local governance. I think it's exciting for me, and I want to be able to be a conduit and a vehicle for those voices, as well as maybe I can even encourage some of my peers to start entering in local races. Lastly, I think due to my experience in the social services as well as living on Nantucket, I have a pretty close and in-depth knowledge of the needs of people who are wanting to have families out here, people who are trying to live here, and the challenges that this really special place does create of an island where we've conserved a large portion of the land, and where there's this dominance of a tourism sector, and figuring out how all these variables can work together so that we can have a community where, I don't know, hopefully my grandkids can come here, and future generations can live here and enjoy and experience the thing. I think the same reasons why we're all here, that this place is beautiful, it's unique, and yeah, and there.
Kelly, Stefan, Alan Reinhardt, thank you both very much. We wish you the best of luck. Thank you for your service and your willingness to participate today.
Thank you.
With that, that concludes the.
Scott,
Go ahead, Charlie.
there is one question from an audience member.
Oh. Do you want to do one more question?
Sure.
Do you think the land bank should help solve the current employee housing issues, either through donating land or splitting some of the 2% fee to go toward housing? And we'll start with Kelly.
I don't like the idea that we would, I think, pin two of probably the most important assets of our community against each other. Nantucket's a place where resources can be abundant with the right voices and the right advocacy. So I think what I would hope would be that we could find resources to address those housing issues, but not at the expense of land conservation. But I do think there is an onus as the second largest landowner to be really collaborative, to be kind of on the forefront of these conversations. They're inexplicably kind of tied to each other, land conservation and housing on a place where land is finite. So we have a role in those, if I'm fortunate enough to be on the commission, we have a role in that conversation, but housing and land conservation are two things that we need to figure out a way to, I think, support bilaterally.
Thank you. Alan.
The land bank has a very rigid legal a legal situation that we work under. We cannot divest ourselves of property. Once we acquire a property, we can't sell it, we can't freight it away, or with the exception of freighting it to the town of Nantucket. And we've done a couple of land swaps that are mutually beneficial. Any property that we have for conservation is locked in conservation. And so, you know, we just can't give it away for affordable housing and so on. I think that the two elements, affordable housing and conservation, don't necessarily have to be mutually exclusive. I mean, you're talking about defined land area. We can only build so many houses by our zoning and so on, and so much of the land for conservation. So I don't see that. I don't see it as a conflict. Let me put it that way.
Well, thank you both again very much. We appreciate your being here today and the preparation, and thank you for your service as well. With that, the candidates forum, I think, is now concluded, and we'd like to thank everybody for joining today. Bye-bye.